Shivasa, we have started taking in the students, right? Shivasa,
Yes,
you there?
all are admitted.
All
Please start
admitted,
the
right?
meeting.
We can start with the session.
Yes.
So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sonali Dubedi, and I'm the Alumni Relations Lead from Jaro Education. So, Jaro Education is India's most trusted online higher education company, founded in the year 2009, where we have transformed careers more than 3,50,000. And since then, Jaro has partnered with top global and national institutes like Wharton, IIMs, and IITs. We are glad to brief you about Jaro Connect portal and its application, which is available on Android and iOS to all the learners. The Jaro Connect portal is one-stop destination for students providing various benefits like job opportunities, networking with peers, free boot camps, and webinars. Now to get started, our topic for today's boot camp is strategy and leadership in VUCA world. And we have Mr. Aditya Basu with us today. Let me introduce Mr. Basu. So he is a senior VP and head of corporate strategy and growth at Altudo, a leading digital agency working closely with Fortune 100 and 500 retailers. For degrees from SITDM Inside, his expertise are in business startups, digital transformations, and providing growth strategy counsel to C-suite leaders. His achievements have earned him industry accolades such as the ET Young Achiever and Strategy Person of the Year awards. And he is frequently sought as a keynote speaker and advisory committee member, contributing insights on topics such as strategy planning, digital transformation, and customer management. Due to his experience in his domain, he has been invited as guest speaker at prestigious institutions such as IIM Indore and IIM Jammu. Let's start with the session, requesting all the participants to turn on the video while the session is going on. So the mic is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining in today's session. I'm Aditya, and I think I'm really excited to do this session for all of you. So let me quickly share my screen. Let me know if you can see it. And just a second. Were you able to see my screen? The presentation?
So we are not able to. If you can check with that. Yes, now we can.
Perfect. Let me arrange my screen so I can see everyone. That's perfect. Great. So hello, everyone. I think it's a pleasure to speaking to all of you today. I am Aditya, and I've been in and around building a couple of companies and doing a lot of strategy consulting, management consulting work for Fortune 100 and 500 companies. In my journey, the reason I want to really highlight what I'm trying to say is a lot of the frameworks which I'll be talking about today are true testament of building such client works as well as building a couple of company too on their IPO journey and their X to 10x growth. In this journey, I have been lucky enough due to my teammates and the work. I've been nominated under 40 under 40, 30 under 30 for ET, and I've been working with companies such as McKinsey, Government of India to build smart city pilots. I was working as a vice chair there, and more than 50 plus brands, Fortune 100, Fortune 500 brands, where have helped and worked with the client CXOs in terms of building their transformation CX journey. Before I move on to today's topic, one thing is very clear I want to highlight, right? And what is strategy, what is planning, and what is this topic all about today? Now, strategy is integrated set of choices which you make to choose your playing field and then enable you to win. And there are three key terms here, right? It might look like simple, but there are three key terms here. The first term is strategy helps you to choose your playing field. It's not just that, strategy is different from planning, right? Planning is something which is in your control. Hiring, building factories, building ABC accelerator, doing ABC, right? So planning is the cost center which you would have control over, but that typically will not enable you to have a competitive advantage. So strategy should be something which enables you to choose your play field versus any other play field so that you can win there. The second is how do you really build the competitive advantage? And the third is what are those parameters which you should look forward to? I know a lot of you would be from different industries, different vertical, different career journeys. But what is important is to ask the right questions. And that's where I would try to conduct this master class where the first half is all about what are we seeing in the industry today across verticals. The second half is I want to talk about some of the frameworks, the strategy frameworks, right from the McKinsey, BCG, Bain, problem solving structure, and actual case studies which we have implemented for clients. And the third is all about the leadership in terms of asking the right question in this volatile, uncertain, complex world, right? And how do you build your A teams? What is leadership today? And what are the key components you need to look forward? So that's what I wanna touch base upon. I want this session to be interactive, so I'll take a pause after each section and would get your feedback, would get to know what you feel about it, and would want to get some perspective from you all as well. All right. So starting from this slide, right? I mean, irrespective of any industry you are today, digital and CXM is the backbone of any industry you work today, right? And you are seeing a massive disruption happening across industry vertical. Starbucks is not a coffee company, it's a digital company. Nike is a lifestyle player, not a foot apparel player, right? So it's pretty important to understand the dynamics. So today I was working with a few analysts like Gartners and Forresters, and these are some of the analysis points which they told me, right? 3 out of 4 shoppers today are trying new shopping methods. And it's just not about the website or the mobile, but different channels, different experiences. So the shopping is changing. And one of the key priorities for CMOs today is to realize value out of their initial investments, right? How do you really capture what the consumer today is searching for? And how do you really build that expectation for the customer, right? So right from the awareness, consideration, nurture to the transact phase. The second key aspect you would see is nearly 25% of companies today want their overall revenue to come from digital channels. 4 years ago, the benchmark was around 2%. So that's where the transformation is happening, right? I think the minimum is 25%, and there are companies who are gathering around 30 to 40% of revenue from digital channels. And there are around 8 channels of use within digital, mobile, web, marketplaces being the top ones. The fourth one I would really like to highlight is 70% of CX leaders expect agility to translate improved customer experience, right? So agility, continuous improvement is a key. Now, moving forward, the consumer behavior is changing and there is a permanent shift to digital, right? And I'm just not talking about digital or CX industry, right? I'm talking about every industry where digital is disrupting, maybe manufacturing where you are including RPAs, maybe fashion and apparel where the digital reach is the more pertinent one, and so on, right? So the whole idea today is whether it's a B2C or B2B, it's essential that you have to have a presence in terms of understanding what your core is. And core means something you could get out in the market and win. And you need to build your adjacencies around it, right? So for any strategy to work, we need to really identify what our core is. And core is very important. To define the core, you need to understand what is your economic model. To define the core, we need to understand what really helps us to get to the market and the consumer to line up to buy for any products or services from a company. So Just a second. Just yeah. So that's very important, right? And the third thing, which is pretty important in this graph, is to see here, right? I mean, just look into to 2021, the e-commerce only sales were around 50%. Now, e-commerce is one of the good channels. There are multi-channel sales which are happening for any companies around, right? So the key, which brings us to the next slide, is this. And I want to take a 5-year snapshot. Yes, we were hit by a pandemic, but what happened during the pandemic? And I'm sure you all must have heard a lot of things and a lot of gyan on what the future looks like. So I'll not get into that. But all I'm trying to say today is customer experience and digital strategy and business strategy for a disruptive world is the boardroom priority. The second thing is choosing the right technology stack and implementation partner is very important. Hyper personalization for consumers are very important in terms of choosing who your customer are, what are their intents, and within the overall journey, right? From the initial awareness phase to the consideration phase to the transact phase. As a company or as a strategy, we should know in awareness phase, is our strategy fine to tell the customer or educate the customer about their need? That's very important, because how do you augment your brand? What is your brand strategy? What is your brand messaging? Is your brand messaging consistent across user segments and across channels? Becomes very important, right? And all of this has to be done with a very core consumer data management. I mean, we need to know who our consumers are and build a very strong pillar in terms of activating a customer 360-degree profile. Now, I would really want you to look into this slide, right? And it's quite an intriguing slide. The reason being, these are the top 50 most valuable brands available today. And the correlation and causation syndrome is not uncanny, right? All of them are digital first company. In today's I mean, Starbucks and Nike just published their analyst report, and they are not talking about coffee or footwear, right? They're talking about what digital changes or what business strategies they are building out in terms of becoming a lifestyle brand. I was working with a telco company a couple of years, 3 years ago, and the whole idea was to transform themselves into a lifestyle brand. So they're looking for a higher purpose. They're not looking for getting the ARPU right. Obviously, they're looking for it, but the higher purpose is how can we help clients drive customer engagement and build a customer lifestyle around it. If you look into Nike, today they are not telling us to buy a product. They are telling us how to really conduct our lifestyle, how to be more active, and all the content that is required in terms of having the right customer experience. I'll just take an example. I'm not sure how many of you are aware with the Burberry 2005-2006 case study. It is one of the case study which is Harvard published, and INSEAD has also published it, right? So while the luxury market was making 150 to 180 CAGR growth every year, Burberry was not doing that. And then a new CEO came in, and there was a lot of discussion what's going on, right? And she figured out that Burberry was too spread out. They were doing everything, but there was nothing distinctive about what they were doing, right? And then they also lost their heritage. So just to fast track it, Burberry was one of the iconic brands because of their jackets, right? So the whole idea was to bring the heritage in. That's the core of any company. Why a person would choose you over someone else? What is your competitive advantage? What is your value proposition? And from there, it is important to also tap on to who are you selling to today? the Gen Zs, the millennials, what they want, right? And that was a transformative journey for them. The financials really picked up, and they again become one of the top popular luxury brands out there because they identified their roots, that's the core, and then they kind of looked into the headwinds and the tailwinds of the market to understand the millennial and Gen Z behavior. And from there, they really build out in terms of what they need to do to really grow and sustain. So I would just leave this slide to tell you that every company who is a leader today has the right business strategy, has the right operating model, and also has the right customer acquisition, customer retention strategy. So these are important pivots you need to look on. I'll just talk about the story of Amazon. You all know it, but what is it that happened in this story, right? And I'll just talk about a couple of theories here. The first is the blue ocean strategy and the red ocean strategy. Now, Amazon started, I think, way back 20 years ago with a name called Cadabra. And obviously it didn't look off because of the complexity and also the ecosystem not maturing in, right? But the whole idea was to start selling books online, as you all know, and today it is selling everything. The key questions you need to ask is, how is that a company gets into a category, wins the entire category, and comes back as a leader in that category, right? Because whenever you look into categories, there are multiple aspects you need to look on to. So the first topic I want to touch on with this slide is the blue ocean strategy and the red ocean strategy. A red ocean strategy is a strategy which is like a red ocean, right? There are a lot of sharks in that ocean, and everyone is eating up everyone. Essentially, that means that a category or a segment which has very high TAM, the total addressable market. So companies will just go in, just like smartphones, right? Now you see every company building a smartphone because the TAM is high. The frequency of purchase is 3 years, right? And still, even if there are 10 to 15 pairs, there's still a lot to be gained for even the player who is at 15th or 20th rank, right? So that's a red ocean strategy. The key aspects you need to look into a red ocean strategy is look into a value chain, right? Every company will have a value chain. Every process or anything you do will have a value chain. And there are people who will fit into that value chain. You cannot win the entire value chain. For example, Reliance today owns the entire value chain. So if you want to build a startup today, you need to figure out within that whole value chain horizontally, where do you fit vertically? Or if it's a vertical integration, where do you fit horizontally, right? So you need to understand the synergies and the correlations to make the value chain analysis proper. That's one. The second is, what is your unique value proposition, right? And there are two things I would like you to go back and read a lot about. The first is the unique selling proposition. That's from me, from a company, from any of you who are working on startups, from anyone of you who are fresher, or any one of you who are still studying, right? There is a unique selling proposition which is known as USP, right? I think that the definition in itself is, how do you activate yourself or put yourself in the market? That's what we call a GTM strategy, the go-to-market strategy. The second aspect is UBP, which is unique buying proposition. Why would a person or a customer at the other end will buy from you, right? Because that's buy from you. Because that's very important to understand, that unique selling proposition and a unique value proposition has to merge together, and that's very important. So I'll just leave you in there. This, on blue ocean strategy, it's a strategy where you create a category. It's a strategy where you create a market, right? Now talk about Amazon. They created a category with Prime Video, which was already there by Netflix, but still they made inches, right? Then they got into the grocery category. Then they got into multiple other categories, right? So it's important to understand that how do you really build three concepts, red ocean versus blue ocean, and how do you compete in that? Second, the unique value proposition and unique selling proposition. How do you differentiate that? And the third is the overall portal models in terms of the value chain analysis, right? So you need to understand the correlation and synergy between your vertical integration and horizontal integration. Now, I just want to talk about this. Look into the Amazon business model, right? I think we all know whenever I think you all know about this, there are certain cash cows where you have to put very limited amount of energy and they give you a lot of money, which could be invested in star products or emerging products. But if you look into the Amazon business model, you would see the online store comprises of 50%, but they're everywhere else in terms of subscription, in terms of the cloud services, in terms of the physical store services, and how their sales grew in, right? In terms of the diversification strategy. Now let's talk about diversification strategy. If you are working on a case study, what are diversification strategy you would see? The first thing you should look is what is the total addressable market for anything which you are getting onto, whether it's a new geography, new category. The second thing you would like to understand is how close that category or diversification channel is to your core, because you need to leverage your core. You cannot just get into a entirely different category and win there, because when you understand the overall value chain and from the sourcing to end delivery, you need to own some part of it for cost economics, for unit economics. At the end of the day, you might have a brilliant product, but if it is not price competitive, it will not sell. So there are certain nuances we need to look on to here, right? And if you look into the revenue and net profits, that's the key aspect you need to look on to. Whenever you get into a diversification strategy, and a lot of startups today, right? I mean, they're just looking at the top line. Top line growth is fine, but EBITDA profitability is required because that's the money you are taking home, right? And that brings in to two sides of equation you should always look when you do any of your engagement on projects. The first side of equation is the revenue value. The second side of equation is the cost value, right? Both are strategic in nature. Then the revenue value should enable you to build your top line at, let's say, 30% CAGR or 50% CAGR through getting into new customers, through launching new products, services, getting into new geographies, and also building a very strong momentum and revenue engine. On the cost side of equation, you need to really look into unit economics. How can you reduce the cost efficiency? What are the efficiencies you can bring in? What kind of process efficiencies you can bring in? Where are the redundancies and so on, right? So that's pretty important. So that's what I was talking about, right? The alchemy of P&L management is always about, do you just focus on increasing revenue? Because obviously that's the North Star metric for any one of you, right? So you need to really understand how do you increase revenue. And there is this tree chart, which I'll come show in my later slides. So you need to understand what either you increase the volume or you increase the price, right? That's where you increase the revenue. That's quite simple, but it gets complex as you get onto that tree chart. How do you increase the products and the services you are selling, right? It's very critical. You cannot, I mean, as an IT company, you can, as an IT services company, you can sell anything because it's a services at the end of the day. As a consulting company, you can consult on anything because it's a consulting at the end of the day. As a product company, you would see the SaaS players like Adobe, Salesforce and all getting through the value chain. While it is generative AI, they're talking about marketing cloud, they're talking about commerce cloud, they're talking about experience cloud, they're talking about the CRMs and ERPs of the world, right? So it's very important to understand how do you build a top line growth for a company. The second important aspect is, while you do so, how do you do it sustainably, right? In terms of reducing cost, how do we improve EBITDA? Can we improve utilization? Can we improve our productivity throughput by, let's say, 1%? 1% in one unit could have 10x impact on the overall bottom line, right? Can we optimize our SGA cost? Can we optimize the technology cost? So there is a cost bucket, and there are consultants and professionals, Lean Six Sigma certified, and few other frameworks, which I'll show you later in this session today, on how to build on the cost and the margins. Now, margins are also important, right? Margins are, yes, directly correlated with cost most of the times, but margins are not always about cost, right? It is about what is your right strategy? What kind of turnarounds you have? Let's say you are running an IT services company, right? Your margins will typically depend upon the nature of project you do. So the kind of analysis you need to make is, should you play there or not? Should you play in a playground where you have to do 12 months of implementation work, and then the accrual happens after 12 months? Or you play, what is the mix you want to play on, right? In terms of the unit economics. So again, I just wanted to highlight this and just highlight one case study so that you understand it really well, right? Back in early 2000, the US airline aviation industry was booming, right? I mean, everyone was thinking, what can we do? Because this is the next big thing. Aviation industry, just imagine 2000. India, there were very few flights, but US, it was a mature economy. There was one airline called Southwest Airline, whose strategy was completely different. They were not playing to play, as strategists call it, right? There are two things. Either you are playing to win or you're playing to play. While a lot of companies were just playing to play, the Southwest Airlines built a strategy where they understood the value economics, the unit economics. And what is that? It is, you only make money when you are up in the air. So they said that we will only fly 737. We will not fly any other airlines. They said we will not do a hub and spoke model. We will just go to and fro. They said we will not give any meals because that will change our inventory and supply chain. Within 5 years, they became the number one, the maximum miles carrying airline in the US, right? So the strategy was completely different. The strategy was, how do we win to differentiate in an industry? And then you see these low air carriers such as Indigos following the suit, right? So it's very important to understand, when you build a strategy, do you really understand the market well? Do you really understand the future well? And how do you really merge both of them with your existing resources, right? Now, same story with Tesla as well. While these graphs may seem okay to you, it's not easy to displace a company as big as GM and Ford and all, right? I mean, look at the market cap. And why is that? That is because the right strategy. Yes, you might say that 10 years ago he started with the EV and now EV is picking up. So obviously this will multifold in 20x or 30x growth. But Ellen definitely had a first mover advantage. But what he had is just not the first mover advantage, but building the capability at the back end within the entire value chain to enable such growth, right? I mean, that's important. And when you're building such huge capability, when you are building such huge assets and liability, it is very important to understand that you have to build it in unit economics, because you cannot compete with the likes of Toyota, GMs, and Fords of the world in 2 or 3 years, right? Where you could compete is your customer acquisition strategy. That's the supply side of the equation, is far more superior than your demand side of the equation. And then you catch up on the demand side of the equation. So I touched a lot of nuances here, and I'll show you some of the frameworks, but I hope it gives you the perspective in terms of as a strategist, how should you think as a strategist? When you look at a problem, you should look at in a holistic way. And it's very important for all of you as a strategist, and everyone is a strategist. I won't say strategy is a different function altogether. For a professional and personal life, you need to strategize well to put you against the competition and put it in a sustainable manner, right? So that's important. Now, I was talking to Forrester. I was there in the Forrester conference, the CXA Pack conference, which happened in Australia this year. And it was quite interesting to see this graph, right? While we talk about digital and all of that noise, the whole idea is you would still see 70% of organization believed having the right strategy, the digital strategy, the integration is important for them, but only 26% have it enabled. So when you look into this graph, it would say that only less than 50% of companies today are having a mechanism or tool to measure it. So and this is Fortune and Fortune 500 companies, right? They kind of interviewed a lot of senior executives across the cohort to understand. This is real data, guys, and I just wanted to show you that while we may say we know these things, at the organization level, at an enterprise level, it's not easy to merge all of this together to build a story and build a growth engine, right? So, and this is again very important to see. A lot of companies, I mean, there were around 500 CXOs which were interviewed by Forrester, and nearly 50% say they are still at a low and a very low maturity. Why you would say, why do they say that? And they say that because they have made the investment. Money is not a question, right? Everyone has deep pockets and investors are there to fund you. But what is the right strategy so that once your investment gets into, let's say, a MarTech or a CX or a supply chain ecosystem, they are not reaping benefits? There is no ROI framework within their whole ecosystem. So let's say you have made a $5 million investment. How can you track and attribute that to your top line or your bottom line? That's a key question, and that's where a lot of companies are struggling, right? So you would see that these are some of the challenges, right? So when I speak and talk to a lot of CXOs and decision makers, I see they're talking about lack of real-time customer insights. How do you operationalize CX? CX looks good. I think it gives you the right what do you say, framework, but how do you really operationalize it? How do you find budget in terms of building a ROI? What is the technology? I mean, I'm not sure how many of you are from a technology and IT background, but whoever is there, you would really understand the fact that technology is changing. The whole ecosystem is changing every 3 years. There is now headless, composable, the stacks are different, and so on. So it gets very difficult for just imagine the amount of money Airtel or Jio of the world has to put in, just not to vote for a 5G and win that spectrum, but to change the entire stack, which is their OSS BSS stack at the back, right? Which is not compatible with the next generation. So it's a ongoing fight all the decision makers are having, and it's very important that we look into these challenges, and the challenges leads to these value drivers. Having a consistent brand experience, very important. Omni-channel experience. Whatever brand I am, if a customer reaches to me through a web, through an offline model, through my stores, through mobile, through marketplace, the experience in terms of my messaging and the products and the pricing and the discounts should be same. If it's different at different junctures or different touch point, that's a major motivated for a customer. The third part is a holistic customer profile. Now, you all might be knowing the first party, second party, third party data, combining all of that together. So let's say a company would know what Aditya is, What are the demographics? Why would he buy or why would he not buy? And merging the entire offline and online context, right? And finally, contextualizing personalization. Gone are the times when we are talking about just personalization because everyone is doing it, right? I mean, brands are on your face because of the data you share with the brands. The fact of the matter is how contextual those communications are. You must have seen Zomato's, Swiggy's really playing creative with these content messaging, right? That's contextualizing to a certain aspect. I've worked with a couple of leading FMCG brands where we enabled hyper personalization on one of their categories, which is cookies and biscuits, right? So that has different nuances to it. So the whole idea, and I'll just summarize this section in terms of everyone says and claims the omni-channel potent, but this is where the industry is today. 39% of people have lack of internal organization structure. 67 people lack customer analytics to really view. There are around 50% organizations which are siloed. So the data warehouses are not talking to each other. The CRM, the ERPs, the commerce, and obviously the data coming from when you visit our offline store is not stitched in together. And the key fact of all of this, guys, is the 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 companies who are in the top quartile, which is the top 25%, are reaping 10x benefit. And that's all about it, right? So if you are not there, you will not grow. You will grow, but you will grow by a, let's say, 10% or 20%. The companies who are in the top 25% are growing at 100 plus percentage. They are going between 7 to 10x. And then these are not my, I mean, subjective analysis. These are reports by the likes of McKinsey, HubSpot, and Shopify reports in all, right? So that's section one, right? I think we have spent some considerable amount of time, 40 minutes, and discussing the industry point of view. I'll just quickly wrap up this, and then we'll stop for a Q&A, and then I'll move on to the frameworks, which actually will help you build strategic frameworks. So as I was talking about, right, this is how this section will tell you how industry is changing. And it is not just one industry which is changing, right? So today, when we kind of interviewed a lot of banks, a lot of companies, who, and asked them, which company do you trust most with securely managing your data? They told bank and financial institutions. But then you look on this slide, slide left, and you would see the companies who are offering such services are not your traditional banks. It's PayPal, Amazon, Google, Walmart, Apple, and so on, right? So the whole idea is to really understand the fact that banks are not required. Banking is, right? So banking is the need, not the banks. If anyone build an ecosystem around it, they will succeed. Now just look into this, right? I mean, I've plotted in the y-axis the big tech companies, and on the x-axis it's the services a bank will offer. And you would see that the fintech space is being completely disrupted. It's a three-way wrestling match between financial services firms, fintechs, and technology companies. This is all what a bank does, and BFSI as a sector is the largest or one of the largest sector from 3 or 4 decades or maybe a century, right? This is how disruption is happening today. Talk about telco, another really big sector. You would see the ARPU falling down. You have already witnessed how Reliance Jio has really changed the dynamics in India. Similarly, it has been changed by multiple players in multiple geographies. But the whole idea I would like to tell you guys is for all the telco companies, the ARPU is falling down because the data service or the voice service you guys were paying 5 years ago or 10 years ago has come down by 1/100th, of the time, right? And you guys are testament for that. The second thing is India is one of the lowest in terms of the data charges. So they have, how do they really earn, right? And that's where they are, all the telco brands are changing to a lifestyle brand today. Uh, and just if you look into this, you would see how the profit pools are changing between 2019 and 2025. If you look into the digital financial services revenue, you would see digital lending, digital insurance, digital investment, and point of sales becoming 80% of their revenue chunk. And you look into the telcos, you would see the data services, the content and video services, the product services, and IoT and M2M services becoming around 70 to 80% of their revenue chunk. These are very important stats, guys, to tell you that disruption is just not a fancy term. It is happening, and it has already disrupted a lot of industries. And when you see this into the financial terms, that is when you would really feel that disruption has already taken place, because this shows into the financial terms, right? I think that's the point I want to make. So this is what telcos are doing in terms of diversification. Just giving you a perspective from a telco, but the whole idea is to tell you that what is working today will not work tomorrow. But if your strategy in terms of building your core is right, if your strategic direction is right, if you have a recurring model in terms of having a core and adjacent, then you will survive, or else it's very difficult in today's world to survive as a business, as an organization, or even as individuals. You can see the competition which is coming in from all the parts, right? So just for telco, uh, the key expectation is frictionless and omni-channel experience, right? Today you would see the geos of the world, or Digis or Telenors of the world, investing so much in content because they want their customers to treat them as a lifestyle brand. They would show you iPhones, they would show you multiple products so that you can buy from that and bundle their SIM. They're not selling you SIM anymore. They're not selling you data services anymore. So that's where it is changing. The B and C are a bit technical, but just to give you an idea, there is a back end of the system and there is a front end of the system. If there is any error which happens to the back end, the front end has to change, right? We have moved to a technology development where you could decouple these two. So you can work on the UI UX of a website without interrupting the backend OSS, BSS, or the ERP CRM. Similarly, if you have some issues with the customer data or something is not working, you can shut that off and your website is still up and running. So that's the kind of updates we have made. This is an important framework. I want you guys to have a look whenever you work on some of the strategic projects. And this is about how do you start with the core services and what are your channels of acquisition, like web store, mobile. This talks about your products and services. This talks about the processes you need to follow. And finally, the metrics, the business value you need to bring in, right? This is a very important framework used by top corporates, leading advisory firms to build a blueprint, right? Take a note. I think this is very important to link your core with your channels of acquisition, with your products and services, the processes you would use, and finally the business value framework, right? So that's there. Now, the reason I'm talking so much digital is just not because I come from and I work with a lot of digital firms, but the fact that the customer who is acquired on a digital channel are 10x more profitable. This is across industry, right? And and uh, and the reason is because they are more mature, they are more frequent to buy your product, they are researching more. So if you just focus on your traditional channels versus your digital channels, you have 10x more profitability. And these are the top three reasons. One, the it's 1/10 cost of the customer acquisition. Second, the revenue generated over 2 to 3 years for a digital customer is 5 to 8x more than a traditional customer. And the cost of transaction and servicing is 1/10, because you have work with chatbots and so on, right? So the customer servicing is also digital today. Uh, this is again a key framework which I think you guys could note of. But whenever you're building a customer journey for your startups, for your organization, or your GTM, there are four phases. The first is to attract a customer, and how do you really attract, and the initiatives you do. The first is, once you attract, how do you really interact it with the customers across channels? The third is, how do you enable the customer to transact with you on online and offline channels? And fourth is the after service, which is the advocacy, right? Very high level, but as you go deep down, you would understand the nuances and initiatives you would like to do to build the customer journey. I'll not spend much time here, but the whole idea of this slide is to tell you that the world is moving up the value chain. And that's where you would see a lot of conglomerates in India launching marketplaces. Tata New App marketplace. Reliance will launch a marketplace. Aditya Birla will launch a marketplace soon. And all of these conglomerates, because marketplace is an ecosystem play. And going forward, every company would like to have an ecosystem play where they own the consumer, and consumer can choose within that platform on any of their needs and wants. And that's where you see massive diversification from conglomerates. Just imagine what was Reliance Jio doing in 2017 and what it is doing today. It is almost in every vertical, same as Amazon. You would also like to see how Mahindras and Tatas have expanded into multiple categories, right? And that's the reason. And these are the data, and I've been working with a lot of such brands to testify that. This is how evolution has happened, right? I would not spend much time, but this is what I was talking about. The future is all about ecosystem. Retailers are moving up the value chain to play a ecosystem play, building efficient network of partners and vendors to seamlessly deliver the what, where, and when of customers' expectation. That's very important. I'll just repeat it again because this is very important. This is the future. This is where a lot of strategies are working out. Network of partners where seamlessly deliver what, where, and when of customers' expectation. So, and this is very important, right? Today's connected consumer wants this. You know me, you show me, you show me that you know me and enable me to value, right? These are the keywords, and a lot of marketing and CMOs are working on this. How do you make a customer believe that your brand knows the customer personally? Then how do you really show the customer through different channel search engines that I really value you as a brand, right? Through personalized messaging, through discounts and whatever it is, right? Then how do you enable me in terms of, let's say you are looking for a Jordan from 3 weeks, and if Nike couldn't really understand that you are looking for a 20% discount on let's say you are in the shopping store, there is no point in moving the conversion needed, right? So that's enabling me. And finally, the value, the whole loyalty tier, building your, making you part of the community and all of that. So it's very important. It's a very convoluted journey. And these are some of the frameworks which you would like to see. Another framework I would like to talk about whenever I work with any client, the first question I ask is, where does the value lie? And the value lie in both the revenue and the cost pockets. I was just speaking about it 20 minutes ago, and this is how you build it, right? So for revenue, increased revenue, you could do multi-channel sales, you could enhance your CX, you could enhance your speed to market, you could do better customer targeting analytics, you could do cross-sell, upsell, you could bundle your products and so on, right? There are multiple initiatives you can run to grow, and then there are multiple initiatives you can do to manage cost. The reason I'm showing you such frameworks are these are the frameworks which will enable you to think in a structured way and so on, right? I'll just skip this slide because I've spoken much about it, but this is how you really build a blueprint in terms of the frameworks, the value chain, the channels, and so on. I would like to stop now and take some questions, just showing you this case study so that whatever I'm speaking has to have a hard stated fact, right? So DBS Bank digital customers represent, you could see this, right? So digital share of income for DBS Bank, they are based out of Singapore, was 49% in 2015. In 2022, it's 82%. And the reasons are the ones I've told you in the previous slide. They targeted digital customers that improve their revenue, that improve their lifetime value, that improve their average order value, frequency of purchase, and also reduce their cost of acquisition through a lot of these, right? So it's important to see this. TPS Bank's digital customers were 2x more lucrative than traditional customers. And this is hard stated case study, which I've got you from my Forrester and Institute research to tell you that this is how the industry is disrupting. This is how whatever I was telling you in the past half an hour to 40 minutes is impacting financials of such large, big corporates, right? So if you would see, these are two important KPIs to look into. The first is the cost to income ratio. For any company, the cost you are bearing as a FTE cost or asset cost versus the income you are getting. And doing an axis of digital versus traditional. So you could see where the delta, and you could also see the cost and economics modules, right? So I'll take a pause here before moving to some of the frameworks. Any questions, any thoughts, how the session is going? It's been 1 hour, we've been speaking. So yeah, I just wanted to understand. No questions? Guys, you know, it's a big cohort, around 300 odd people have joined in, but don't feel shy. It's your opportunity to ask any questions or any thoughts around. Okay, let's move forward. So in this section, I'll talk about actual frameworks, the frameworks which will help you build and involve in strategy discussions and strategy engagements. These are frameworks from a couple of decades of experience working across a lot of Fortune companies to understand. So the first framework is about transformation, right? And how do you really build transformation? Transformations are part of 4 key pods. The first pod is the people pod, the organization culture pod. Is your human capital having the right skill sets? Is the change management right? The second pod is the process pod, right? You look into the operational, product, marketing, sales. The goal is to optimize business process across functions. The third part, and for me, the most important part is the customer growth. How can you reach out to right customers who could give you the right business, right? And the whole objective is to better value props to optimize customer experience. And the final is whatever you do, if it doesn't translate into financial performance, it's of no use. I think these are good tactical activities, but even if it doesn't directly translate into a financial performance, but I feel it should be tied on, and all of you should know how to tie down all of your activities in your day-to-day professional work to a higher purpose of wherever your company is and what they want to achieve. Even if your project, right? If you a lot of you are engineers, you should ask your project managers and delivery managers, what is the overall impact of the project I am in? If you are at a managerial level, you should ask your directors and VPs, what are the financial metrics we are looking at, and how is my team and my overall view helping you achieve that? So it's very important to understand the higher purpose on the organization level, on a functional level, on a view level, and a team level. And if you are on the technology side, so you should understand from a project level as well. So this is what the transformation framework looks like. This is from Howard. Mr. Sunil Gupta has started it, and I have used it on multiple client engagements. The first talks about reimagining your business, which is all about the business scope, the business model, the ecosystem, right? It's important to understand what is the business scope, chart the business model, the operating model, and finally the ecosystem play I spoke about. The second is how do you reevaluate the value chain, which is very important, right? Your overall operational readiness, the whole value chain, the whole innovation perspective. The third is how do you connect with your customers, right? It's very important to understand your acquisition strategy, retention strategy, engagement strategy, and do you have a measurement framework to really working around, right? And finally, the fourth part is the P, which is the people, your organization. Do you have the right skills? Do you have the right capability? And do you have the right org structure? So all of this, BOCP, business, operation, customer, people, works in a circular manner, and it helps you to iterate continuously. Now, the second framework which I would like to talk about is the severity and priority matrix. It's very important for all of you to understand that anything you do, a project or any engagement, a consulting engagement, this is very important. The first part of the equation you see here, where is that? Okay. Anyways. Yeah, so the whole idea is efficiency and effectiveness. I think efficiency is doing the way, working in the right thing. You would see charting out x-axis as business priority and the y-axis is business priority and x-axis is business severity. A lot of activity should be in your upper grid, which has high business priority and high business severity, right? So all of your recommendations should have a feasibility as well in embarked into it. So these are the four patterns, the four attributes you should look on to. The first attribute is efficiency. You are doing the right thing, but are you taking too much cost, too much time to deliver it? Effectiveness, on the other hand, is doing the things right, right? Are you pursuing the right goals? So this is a sample from one of my engagement where we have taken these two grids in terms of doing things right and doing right things and kind of charting it out, right? So that's there. And this is another very important framework which I think you guys should know. It's all about the business process modeling and reengineering. It talks about everything an organization needs to align in terms of their operations with the business strategy. How do they really improve the process flows, the communications, the consistencies across operational efficiencies and gain a competitive advantage, right? So it's very important. So this is one framework where you would like to build a blueprint, have swim lanes, understand what is working, what is not working. So you would see, I have tagged it with inefficiency. I would tagged it with uh, things which are not working. I have tagged it with things where there is redundant, right? These are some of the best practices which are being used to really tie up an organization processes and make it work across multiple views. So the streamlines could be your different teams, different stakeholders, and there could be x-axis, which could be phases. So business planning is a phase, selection is a phase. This is an actual sample from a consulting I did for a leading fashion and apparel player in Southeast Asia. So this is again one of those frameworks. Another framework I would like to talk about is the feasibility and impact in terms of the recommendations or improvements you want to make, what is the impact they bring in the organization's charter, and what is the feasibility, because it's very important to tie up everything which you do in a roadmap manner, in a 6 month, 9 month, 12 month, and 3 year plan, so that you can figure out the dependencies. You can start with low hanging fruits, which has lower capex, lower opex, and then once you set the foundations right, then you can optimize. So it's always about setting the foundations, then you optimize, and then you iterate, right? Every organization works in that manner. So these are some of the frameworks which will really help you implement in your real life and professional scenarios. And this is an example, right? So a business case built for CFO, CDO, CIOs for a merchandising company. The x-axis shows the market strength, and the y-axis shows the industry adoption, right? This is one case study I have done to identify what are the new trends in the market which could be adopted, right? Typically, you would see the Zaras of the world take hopping onto the new trends, the LVMH build metaverse on the digital twin, and even Nike did that, right? So whenever you are building and working on such exercises, it's very important to understand the market strength. So the market strength is there enough need in the market so that your products and services can be brought off and has an economic model to it, right? And these are the grids. Transit, the grids which you should focus on is always necessary and experimental. Necessary will give you a revenue output, and experimental would help you in terms of building the edge in terms of the weak signals and having a competitive edge going forward. Now, I think a lot of you, as I have chatted, are from UX UI background. So this would not be a surprise to you, but essentially the tech people who work very hand in hand with the UX folks or the business folks and wanted to understand users. So gone are the time when we just did customer segments, right? I mean, no, very less companies does that, right? What they are doing right now is understanding the user persona, the psychology. And I'll just give a quick example so that you understand. Most of you must have heard about IKEA or visited the IKEA store. Do you know the whole strategy of building their store as a maze is tapping onto human psychology? For the fact every 500 meters there is a curve so that you feel immersed and you have curiosity to see what is coming next. That's human psychology, and they have built a similar template to understand how can we make a customer immerse themselves into our products and experiences, right? So they have consciously build that maze kind of a structure, which enables you to spend half of the day at least with some good food and their experiences to really embark. And then the second big experiment IKEA did was do it yourself, because there was a research which was conducted and it was noted that the if a consumer builds its own product, do it yourself, builds its own, they will tend to value it more. So the reason I'm telling this case study again is to tell you that today you need to understand the personas really well. What are the goals? What are the frustrations? What are the motivations? What are the triggers which moves a persona from a awareness phase to a consideration phase to a nurture phase to a transact phase? It's very important to understand all of that, right? Uh, so this is a sample of a user persona, and typically you create 4 or 5 core user personas to understand what are the things and how should you activate it. The second part is journey mapping, which is very important, right? I think it's very important to understand the phases, the business goals, the customer touch points, the customer journey steps before the touch points. What are they thinking on these touch points? The experience once they kind of experience the touch points, and finally the opportunities. This is a framework. I think if you take this home, this is a very complete holistic framework to build any customer journey. And it's just not for the UX or the creative team. It is for everyone, from a product management side, from a business analysis side, from a management consulting side, to have this framework. Now let's talk about awareness. The business goal of awareness is to educate the customer of their need. The business goal of consideration could be, okay, my customer knows their need, but is my brand in top of the awareness? Is my brand in top three brands of consideration? And then there are activities to do that. The business goal for a transact is, okay, I think the customer has now come on my website or my store. How can I convince him or her to transact? And digital, it is like a 3-step or a 3-click or a 4-click transact, right? So and that's where a lot of customer experience, UX experience in terms of website optimizations are taking place. And even on in-store, once you land in a store, the sales box will have iPads with all your interactions on the digital media. So they already know what you are looking for, what your demographics are, what kind of spending, disposable income you have, what kind of spending patterns you have, so that the conversions have really increased. I'm not sure whether you have seen that. We have implemented that for a couple of luxury cars experience center in COVID time. So feel free to experience that. The business goal for a service experience is, I have a problem. Can you help me solve that? Right. And then there are multiple touch points. It could be a call center. It could be you calling on your website, you messaging through a chatbot, whatever it is, right? The whole idea is to have a good service experience, and finally the advocacy, which is all about the 360-degree advocacy, having the right loyalty, having the right membership, and helping consumer build a community. I think you must have seen a lot of brands now building community, because that's the next big thing. This is how it looks like. These are some of the KPIs. I think this is another framework you should look into for working on any business KPIs. There are three key aspects. The first is business growth, the second is retained customers, the third is process efficiency. And within that, your initiatives could be, how can you increase traffic? How can you increase conversion? How can you really improve the average revenue or average order value, right? Average margins. For retained customer, you could really understand how should we target better, retarget better, what could retain them, how could we decrease churn, and there are a lot of insights, right? I think the whole idea about this section is to tell you to have certain best practices framework used by the best in the business to give you an idea in terms of how to scope it out, right? And it's always important, if you have seen the left side of the slide, I've been clearly demarking the what, why, and how. For all the things you do, it's very important to demarcate what are you trying to achieve, why are you trying to achieve, and how will you achieve it. Most of the times you know the what and the how, but you typically don't figure out the why. Why are you doing the things you are doing, right? And some of you would be in the managerial position, some of you would be at the executive position. It's very important to drill it down to your teams in terms of the why, and that's where they connect to your purpose and the higher purpose in terms of the why. So it's very important. I've already spoke about it. This is more of a Lean Six Sigma model, where you would see the phases, the business goals, and these are the functions. So here, I'm not sure how many of you have certain knowledge on Lean Six Sigma, but ideally it works to identify value-added activity and non-value-added activity. value-added activity is absolutely based on your what do you say, skill set. So as a human, as a skill resource, you would add value. And non-value-added activity is, and with Gen AI and AI, the non-value added activity will increase over years. But the fact of the matter is, it is what it is, right? So if you are in a process which talks about 1+1 is 2, that could be done better by a machine, right? So it's time to introspect and think in terms of how do you elevate your game so that you're not in a redundant process. So and the whole idea is to eliminate, for any organizations, to eliminate the non-value added activities, which could be done at 1/10 of the cost, much better because it's done by machine. So that's the idea, right? Again, I'll not get much into it. These are Lean Six Sigma concepts, but the non-value added activities I was talking about is calculated across process. So it's a quantitative exercise you could see in here. And essentially you are talking about, let's say this 405 minutes here, right? Which is what, in a day, around 50% of your time is non-value added activity. You better align your utilization properly. So this is actual sample from one of my case studies, which kind of breaks down the value added and non-value added activities here. Here's the annotate. So if you could see, I'll just stop so that you could see how actual engagements look like, right? So now, what all we have discussed? We have discussed what a strategy is, right? And what are kind of the perspectives you need to build. We also discussed and see how the industry is moving in terms of the macroeconomics. I've also shown you actual examples from industries such as BFSI, telco, retail, in terms of how such disruptions and change in technology is impacting their financials. I've also shown you analysis from analysts and research organizations such as Gartner, Forrester across the world to show you where the actual data is in terms of maturity. And finally, I have also shown you the most precious gold I have is the frameworks which you don't get access to that easily. Obviously, you have to be part of really really such ecosystem to get access to such frameworks, right? And I've also shown you working of some of these frameworks and how can you implement that. Now, the second last section I want to talk about is the problem solving methodology. MBB stands for the McKinsey BCG Bain, and the whole idea is, because I'm an ex McKinsey alumni, I thought I'll bring in what is the secret sauce or what is the structure of problem solving for some of the best companies in the world, right? And how do they really solve the toughest problem on the ground? So that's the problem methodology, and this is how a consulting methodology, and don't really generalize consulting with the consulting industry. It is part of every industry function you are doing. Whether it's a product manager, you need to find out your product market fit, you need to understand your consumer. Whether if you're a services company, you need to understand where are you selling and what are the services, right? If you are a startup, you need to understand how do you build the 0 to 1 for a startup, right? So irrespective of wherever you are, even if you are sales, you need to really understand what your customers are, right? So the first is problem definition. You really need to understand what what a problem statement is and how can you really build a problem statement. The second is problem structuring in terms of dividing your problem into meaningful modules. We call these modules as MISI, which is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, so that you have no overlaps, but it covers the entirety of the problem. So the whole idea of a problem definition is, and sometimes most of the times when a client comes in or your manager or a boss comes in, that's a one liner problem. But the key is we don't define the problem well. We might be chasing wrong ends. But if we define the problem well, then there is a solution. 80% of problem uh, times where it has not worked is when we have not defined the problem well. And this will come with experience, guys. It will not come overnight, because to understand the problem, you need to understand the industry nuances. You need to build your internal scorecard in terms of understanding, okay, this is the N+1 perspective which I can bring on the board, right? Everyone is talking about ABC, but can I bring the nth perspective in here? The third is prioritizing problems. Very important. I think any company we work in, I have seen 80% of results are coming from 20% of the initiatives. It's a Pareto rule. It could not be 80, it could be 70, it could be 90, but the whole idea is prioritize your problems in terms of storylining. If your structuring doesn't have a storyline, it will not really communicate well. So you need to really understand what are you solving, who are you solving for, and what is your storyline, right? So you need to really develop the mind map. There are a lot of templates. You can use Miro and other things to develop a visual map, but there has to be a mind map. This relates to these three things. These three things relate to five things. So you have a complete blueprint of your mind map. And finally, you have to prioritize key issues and eliminate the issues which doesn't address any top line or bottom line, right? The only time, I think this is the cliche, but this is as important as it gets. Time is the only limited resource you have. And to bring in the impact as strategists, we need to really understand the smart work. Today you are competing in a world where everyone is hardworking, everyone is skilled, everyone has the pedigree that they are working, information is available everywhere. So the real competitive advantage is the smart work you do. The fourth is the issue analysis, right? Now you have done the definition, right? You have done the structuring, right? You have prioritized your problem. But what is the issue, right? You need to understand in terms of the what and the how analysis. And that goes deep in terms of what is the issue for the problem, and then doing an as is analysis. For example, my revenue is not increasing more than 10%. That's a problem. But what is the issue behind it? Is my product not selling? Am I selling to a wrong customer? Is there is a lot of lead time to build my product and services? Am I competing in a red ocean? A lot of things, right? That's where you do the issue analysis, you do the as is analysis, and finally you do the so what analysis, which is the most important part, right? There might be 100 issues, and this is for personal and professional life as well. The so what analysis is the contextualization. What does that mean to you? Yes, there is a war going in Ukraine. What is the so what for you? Yes, there would be macroeconomic conditions. Obviously, you're not happy. The prices of electricity might go up and all of that. But at the core of your daily activities, how much time you should invest in that, right? So that is the so what analysis. And finally, you synthesize all the finding and develop it. So this is very important, guys. I mean, that's why I spent some 10 minutes on this, because any problem statement should have these 7 steps, and this should be the structure. This is, and guys, this is really gold. And I mean, you will not seldom get access to such frameworks, which is the McKinsey BCG Bain framework. We have used it on multiple clients. This is how you build it, right? The key takeaways: your MISI analysis, your multiple arguments, your sub arguments. Then you complete it with primary and secondary data. You group the like ideas and then build the recommendations, right? So it's very important to understand the overall structure, the steps, and the structure here, right? And finally, as you know, this is the chronology we speak about, which is first is calibration, then you do the as-is, then you do the to-be, then you do the recommendations. There is a specific goal for all of these phases, and the whole goal is to baseline your as-is, benchmark it to the industry best practices, competitive analysis, and finally build a roadmap where you could achieve success, right? I'll gonna take a pause now for 5 minutes, and then I'll just speak about the final section, which is a bit philosophical, but it's very important and my favorite section, which is what is the leadership, right? How do you build the alchemy of ROI in your personal and professional life? So I'll start with that, and I'll take 2 minutes and I'll just get back.
Sure, sir. So, dear participants, I'll be sharing a feedback form onto the chat box for everyone, requesting you to fill up that form and give us your insights related to the same. All right? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I'm back. So what I'll do is I'll quickly wrap up this section in 15 minutes and open up 15 to 20 minutes for Q&A. I think there are a lot of questions I now see on the chat, so I would love to interact with all of you for Q&A session. Right. So the key thing, right? I think we spoke about strategy and all of that, but now leadership is personal, right? How to become a good leader? And to become a good leader is to become a good person, right? To really empathize with your team and really understand. But one of the key attributes for a good leader is to ask the right questions. As you move up in the career ladder or in whatever aspects you are serving as a leader to your team, if you are asking the right questions, that's the first and the right step to build the GTM, right? You need to understand the journey between your USP and UVP as an individual. What is your unique selling proposition? Because today's world is all about informal leadership. Gone are the times where people would directly report to you. As an organization in the VUCA world, you have to really inspire people to really look up. I mean, people should look up to you, right? So that's the whole idea. It's in the informal world, right? So you need to understand your USP, what is your USP and what is their UVP, and tie it along, right? And this goes along while you build GTM strategies for products and services. You should spend some time building GTM strategies for you, because you are a product and your personal branding is as important as anything else, right? So how do you really see yourself in this picture in terms of what are your core skill sets? What is that you really want to improve? What is that will drive your economic model, right? So you need to really questions on the what, which is your objective, your higher purpose, your end state, your success. What does success defines for you as a person? Because the meaning of success would be different for different individuals, and that's absolutely fine. It has to be a point where you get authentic with yourself, right? Now, the key aspect is a pivot is a change in strategy without a change in your vision. And after this session, I don't want you guys to change as a person or change your perspective, but just pivot it along in the right way, right? The first thing is the 4P I would be talking about. I don't really like to talk about other things. I will talk about from my personal experience. I do follow a 4P methodology, a 4P framework, which is an internal scorecard, and talk about how I have achieved the success in terms of what you have seen earlier in the span of career I had. Second key aspect I would talk about is legometry. It's very interesting, and I would like you guys to focus on what I'm talking here, right? Third is the real power of compounding and cumulative. It's important to understand as an individual, as a team, the power of compounding and cumulative. The fourth is delay gratification, and I'll talk about certain use cases. Today's Gen Z, I mean, and the new age population is all about instant gratification. So how can you should delay gratification? And the fourth and the fifth one is it's very important to understand the power of influence, right? I think we all are taught hard skills, but seldom are we taught the soft skills. We are not taught the body language or how do you influence people and other things. I'll give some book recommendation and obviously connect me up on LinkedIn and we can chat about some of these things. I'm really passionate about uh, reading about and learning about some of these aspects. So yeah. And finally, sustenance, right? What do you pivot and what do you perish for? So these are the 6 aspects I'll be quickly covering today in the leadership connect. The first is the 4P connect, right? Now I want to really talk about and tell you that the all frameworks which I talk about, right? New frameworks are like climbing the mountains. The larger view encompasses rather than rejects the more restrictive view. That's all about frameworks. It opens up your perspective and horizons. It scopes it out in a structured manner so that you have discipline as a rule book of your personal choice, but the frameworks can give you the creativity and design thinking. Now, my 4P framework talked about these 4 things, right? And for anything you do, it's very important to have a perspective. A perspective you need to build about anything which you are doing, right? It could be a fundamental strong point, an authentic viewpoint of who you are. If Aditya is presenting a point of view on any matter, that should differentiate with everyone in everyone else in the boardroom or in the room, right? So perspective is very important, and that's where it's important that you read a lot, you talk a lot, and you gather a lot of these insights. The second is passion. I mean, being mindful about the big picture and business impact your work commands and demands is very important. The third is perseverance, and perseverance and diligence is the key to success, right? I think I wouldn't attribute anything else rather than perseverance for the success I had, right? And finally is the performance. Even if you are on the right track, you get to run over if you just sit there and don't improve continuously. So it's very important to have these 4Ps embedded in you. And that's what I would say. Finding your true ikigai is very important, right? And that's where if you have not read this book, Ikigai, you should definitely do read these 2 books, Ikigai and Rage. While Ikigai talks about these aspects in your life, you should have a balance of some of these. I think no one is leading an ideal life here, but it should be what you love, which is your passion and mission, right? and what you're good at. The intersection is passion, right? So you need to understand what you love and then hone your skills. The second aspect is what you are good at and what you are paid for. Anything which you are good at should have an economic engine. Hobbies are fine, but if you are not having an economic engine, you should have it, because you should not be doing things for free when you're good at it, right? But the thing, and the final is the word, what the word means, right? An intersection is called ikigai. And I would really like you to go back and read this book, understand it's a Japanese way of living, which is understanding the higher purpose, right? And this is what it says. Skills helps us do, values help us become. And this is the hedgehog concept. Again, I would recommend you guys to read Range, which talks about generalization versus specialization, which is very important, right? I think we need to pivot in our life multiple times between being a generalist and being a specialist. So read this book, which talks about what you are passionate about, what you are best at doing, and what drives your economic engine. You should be in the sweet spot. And this is called the hedgehog concept, which says the fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing, and and there is a story behind it. It's a very famous story. You guys can read it offline. The second is ligometry, right? Very one of my favorite topics here. LIGO means shadow or darkness. Metry means metric or measurement. It's a Greek word. Amit Tofani has done a TED on that, and I think that is one of the fantastic TED talks I will listen to, right? And he talks about that he is in the Louvre Museum of Paris, and he's in the second floor, and he's looking to some of these beautiful paintings, right? And he suddenly realizes that no one is at that side of the wall. And the reason is the other side of the wall had the famous painting Mona Lisa. While all the paintings are good, the whole world is just looking at that one painting. And he then points out in our society that are we also living in that ligometry, which is the periphery of the circle. So do we know what we don't know? And can we acknowledge that? That's very important, right? To acknowledge things which we don't know so that we could improve on. And then there is a framework which we have built in all of you who are going through this career journey and taking up executive education and listening to professionals such as me. There always will be these horizons. The y-axis is the knowledge, the x-axis is the time, right? The horizon one is when you know everything, right? And these will come whether you get into a college, the initial 3-4 months would be difficult. Then the second semester or third semester, you would say, oh, I am the king or the queen of this thing, and I know everything about it. Then you move on to a second horizon, which is partially known. Even in your career journeys, you start, let's say, as a software engineer, then you kind of master that. Then you move on to multiple aspects of team management. As a consultant, you move into different industries. As a product manager, you move into different use cases and the market fit equation, right? So there are always three horizons. Horizon one is where information is readily available. The power lies in inference and simplifying things. That's very important. In Horizon 1, your competitive advantage would be inferencing and simplifying things when the information is in abundance. Okay. The second one, horizon, is don't mistake your abundance of knowledge for sufficiency of your knowledge. Take it, understand this again. In Horizon 2, don't mistake abundance of information for sufficiency of your knowledge. And Horizon 3, where it's all mostly unknown. Modern workplaces suffer from knowledge inflation and knowledge retention, right? People today are claiming more than they do. So my advice or steer to all of you today would be to be the change, right? Let's acknowledge the things which we don't know, and then really ask for help, right? Because pretension doesn't help, and we have a lot of people today pretending more than they do and know. And finally, be bold to acknowledge your gray spaces. As a leadership, the first aspect is to be vulnerable so that you build the credibility and trust for your team members. This will help you evaluate opportunities and risk in a better way. So what does that mean for a skill set, right? Is it a syndrome or palindrome? So this kind of comes back to that book range where it talks about generalization versus specialization. And the whole idea is the first 5 years of your career, build the foundational skills that will help you navigate the roles and responsibilities in the first innings of your career, right? And typically the first innings of your career is somewhere between 6 to 8 or 9 years, where you start as a specialist and then grow as a generalist. Or you start as a generalist and then you grow as a specialist in terms of any industry and so on. The second is in Horizon, where you have to build industry knowledge and disruptive skills, right? Like the Gen AI is coming in, what all you are doing to build that skill, that's absolute mandatory to have in today's world. Industry knowledge, whatever function you are in, you have to pivot in a couple of industries to be as a SME. So that's the Horizon 2, which is again another 8 years or 10 years. And then the Horizon 3, where you are really an executive, a CXO, where you have to juggle between generalization and specialization. So that's very important to understand. I get a lot of questions speaking to a lot of B school aspirants and young career aspirants, that how do we navigate? This is how you navigate, right? I think the first and important thing is to build your foundational and hygiene skills. That's why your company is paying you, or even if you are in a startup, that's why your consumers will pay you. The second is to really build an industry knowledge. If you are in an industry, then build functional knowledge. If you are a function, then build industry knowledge, right? I'll the third aspect I'll talk about is compounding and cumulative, right? Now we all understand the art and science of compounding and how it helps. So I'll not really get into and open this video in terms, it's a beautiful video, but given the time, I just wanted to tell you that have a cumulative power, right? Use your ecosystem, use your syndicate, use your team, use your organization to build a cumulative power, right? The second is appreciate diversity. That will open up your mind. And diversity has multiple nuances. It also means looking at a problem in a different way, looking at a person in a different way. Remove your cognitive bias. As a manager, as a leader, that's the first thing you should do. We all are brought up with certain attributes of in society that we kind of build cognitive biases. It's very important that we analyze cognitive biases, we kind of acknowledge cognitive biases, we become mindful of our actions and kind of remove cognitive biases when we are talking to people, because at the end of the day, everyone is working for a common objective, whether it's growth, whether it's passion, whether it's fun. So these are the three common objectives, and then there are multiple nuances about it, right? The third is very important. I think I can do a specific session on that, but there are two types of IQs always. The first is the logical IQ, the one we all know, right? I mean, it tests in our all competitive exam. Logical IQ means what is our IQ. The second is the relative IQ, which not much people talk about. Relative IQ means, let's say you are on step 2, you have a capability to get to step 8 and analyze what it would be to be at step 8 and come back and take that decision in step 2. That's algorithmic relative IQ. I'll just leave you with these thoughts. Go back and read about it. You will be fascinated about how our mind works. And while we all go gaga about the logical IQ, the relative IQs are the ones which takes people in the longer journey. A sample survey was published, and for all the CEOs who are really doing well, the relative IQ was much higher than the I am the IQ, average IQ, right?
Put in 30 minutes.
Now, the second and fourth aspect I want to talk about, I think I don't want to be much preachy, but it is very important as a leader, as a person to delay gratification. It's very important to understand, procrastinate gratification, and build an authentic point of view. Anything, any point of view, any subject matter expertise take time. And I have seen we kind of always overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 5 years' time, right? And there is this marshmallow experiment which was conducted by Stanford, where these small kids were given marshmallows and were told that we are going out and you don't have to eat the marshmallow for 5 minutes. They were distributed into 5 or 6 segments, and as kids are, there were multiple segments who ate it, and then there were a few segments who didn't eat the marshmallow and waited for 5 to 10 minutes before the teacher can come in. This study was done for 75 years. This is one of the most successful and popular study Stanford has done on people. And it was found the people who kind of resisted the marshmallow did well, just not professionally, but in all aspects of life. And go back, read that whole, there is a TED talk on it, which is very important. So the key pointers I would like to highlight again is, for anything you do, master the subject and believe in the process. It's very important to have an authentic point of view. Before you get down to really do something, master the subject. It's very important that we live in an ecosystem where we are talking with people who know what they're talking, right? And that's where it comes and build a strong point of view. It comes with practice, and it takes a lot of effort to build a point of view over years, right? That's where editorial comes in. Attention to details is very important, but with a convex lens, so that you look into the entirety of the picture, but also have attention to details. And the final is the power of influence. Now, this is a tagline I love, right? Don't blame a clown for acting a clown. Ask yourself why you keep going to the circus. This is a powerful line. I love this, right? I mean, don't blame a clown for acting a clown. I ask yourself why you keep going to the circus. And that's the power of influence. Leadership is mostly about mastering soft skill, empathy, building cross-functional approach. And it is all about influencer persuasion, right? These are some of the aspects, and there are studies around it. But I would like you all to be mindful to really understand, are you reciprocating enough? Whatever you are today, you are all privileged. Less than 1% of India's population sitting here having this discussion. Are we reciprocating enough to our society, to our teams, to our organization? The second, are we practicing gratitude enough for whatever we have, right? We are not. How many times you are going back to your team members and saying, thank you, the organization has enabled me for ABC, the team members have enabled me for ABC, your managers might be not a good manager, but he or she has enabled you for ABC, right? So practice gratitude. Commitment is very important. So if you want to be good leader, stand by your word, right? I'm talking from my experience of leading multiple teams and organization, and commitment is the key, right? I think it's very important to understand commitment and consistency, and persuasions also. So, and finally, I would leave all of you with this final thought, that practice authenticity over accuracy. Be your authentic self. That's what is needed. I think we all cannot be accurate. No one knows everything, right? But if you build an authenticity, trust, and credibility within your team, that's the first step and the last step to leadership. Your principle versus value, right? Your value is what you believe in, and principle is the algorithm to follow that value. So it's very important that you build that value system within you so that you can practice and build that culture within the team. And the final is the posture and position. One of my favorite leaders always tells that you need to understand your position and the posture. And between this is the compromise. Position is from where you'll not get down from that aspect. Let's say you are getting onto a deal, right? And you want it to sell at $300 and the client wants it at $200, but your posture is 250. So that's a compromise you make, right? So it can be aggressive, passive, defensive, miniatory. In your position is the line on the sand beyond which you will not, there is no ability to compromise, right? That's where I kind of end today's session. Here I am. Please connect me on the LinkedIn and let me know how the session is. I'll be reposting about this, so you can let me know about this session. And
Yes,
yeah,
yes,
uh,
absolutely, sir.
thank you. I'm open now for any Q&A.
Yes. Requesting all the participants to raise their hands if they have any kind of questions accordingly, so that we can start with the Q&A rounds. Okay, so we have Ipsita Das with us. Just tell us. Yes, Ipsita, you can go ahead. Can you turn on your camera? Your camera not mine. Yeah.
Yeah, 1 minute. Yes, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Sir, as you said that as a leader, you should always a roadmap you have in your mind. So as a leader, always you need a team. So when you have a roadmap or a mindset for your strategy for your upcoming business or whatever business you are going to right now, so for that, if you feel that there is some problem, there is some implementation of new strategies, for that you will do it by yourself or you have to wait for your juniors to guide you, or you will take a decision uh, uh, or you are going to wait for your seniors to approve that. What is the strategy you are going to follow, sir?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, and I've seen that in across organization, right? The first thing I would say is, as a leader, you really don't need a team, right? There is a framework which you have built that a leader is always who leads a team. But today's world is individual leadership. It's about how you influence others, right? There's a lot of individual contributors who are acting as a leaders, right? So it all starts with you. So to answer your question, you have to practice what you preach. But yes, to build it at scale, to compound it, you need to understand what your team comprises of, right? And your juniors or your team should really align to the objectives, because the objective you're trying to solve is not a personal objective. And that's where the communication becomes very important. To really understand who your teammates are, what are their motivations, and are they aligned to your organization goals and whatever you're trying to do, right? So as a leader first, if you think that it doesn't aligns with your philosophy and team's philosophy, you should really tell the upper management that this is not going to work. This is my strong point of view about it. Second thing is, once it works out, your team should be aligned in terms of the higher objective for that, right? And finally, your question, uh, see, leadership has three aspects. One is the culture, which doesn't need any approval. The second is the financial and processes, because you need to leverage certain resources for which are of companies. For that, you need approval. And the third is the practice and the discipline, which again you don't need approval, right? So your tribe, that is your team, and your individual self is all about yourself. The permission is just to use those resources, be in a protocol for whatever organization you're working.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I hope, Ipsita, your questions would have been answered in a great way. We'll move
Yes,
next
thank
to,
you.
yes, we'll move next to Megha. I'll just ask her to unmute herself.
Hi everyone. Hi Aditya. First of all, I would like to thanks for this beautiful and beneficial session. And I have a question that we have different types of team member in our team. So if one or two we will get like who are not supporting, and they have very good rapport with the management. So how to deal with such people?
Yeah,
They are
that's
not supporting with you, but they have very good rapport with the higher management. So
That's an interesting case, right? And we all face such situation where and typically the organization today are open doors. So your juniors would have direct access to your seniors and the dynamics around it, right? But at the end of the day, if you're leading a team or a PNL, it's your accountability within the race structure, right? So if anything goes wrong, it's your accountability, you would be held responsible for it while the successes of teams, right? So it is very important if any of your team member doesn't align to the success of the mutual objective, you have to raise it to the management, but not in a, it's more of a constructive feedback, right? I mean, in terms of if we get ABC, we can do that, right? And then understand the perspective. The second, obviously, is to really have a one-on-one connect, because at the end of the day, we are all humans. There might be certain aspects that that person is looking on to, right? Or maybe the objectives are not aligned. Sometimes I've seen the Gen Zs really getting, what do you say, uh, gratified by just working with the seniors, right? They don't want to work with the middle management and so on because that's fancy for them. So whatever that case is, once we understand that aspect, and then you can tell them that there is a hierarchy, there is some ways you can go, and obviously make a structure where it all works together. I have done that personally in my experience. There were a few people who were directly reporting to the CEO office, and then we made that different structure because their skill sets were not fitting in here, right? So, and then there were a couple of scenarios where we understood their objectives and gave them the right exposure and the right clients and whatever the right parameters are to work. I hope that answers some part of your question, Megha. Yeah.
thank you.
That sounds great. We'll move next to Mr. Suman Saurabh. I'll just ask to unmute. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Basu, for this amazing session. It was really good pointers to know and quite a extensive research that you have done. One question which I feel, okay, whatever you said is very good for the corporates, the big corporates, and it's easy to implement over there. But what about the small business owners where they have a team of 2 people, 5 people, etc.? How do we build such strategies for them, or uh, on the two aspects, leadership as well as digitalization? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, pretty interesting point. And I'll just take a, so I have also worked with a lot of SMEs in India. And see, the key aspect for strategy is to understand what competitive advantage we build, right? As a company, it might be 2 people, it might be 5 people, it might be 100 people. That's a scale which we should think later. But the first objective is, what are we solving for? Are we good enough to solve that problem? And can we sustain, right? So as a startup or a SME, the core job for the first 2 to 3 years is to just survive, right? And survival means you are building something which someone is buying, you are beating the competition, and then you are survival, right? Then the second aspect of the equation is tying personal objectives. So the team which is working with you would be highly skilled people, right? What is the value proposition they are working with you versus any enterprise out there? Because if they are trading their skills with you, they can trade it with any enterprise, right? And that's where you need to build the value proposition, the employee value proposition. What is it for them to be with you versus the big corporates of the world, right? Because if it is just a skill and money discussion, then they will, it's just about time, right? So that's about you to understand and build the employee value proposition. It could be more inclusive, it could be giving them the higher picture, it could be telling them the vision today you might be very far away from the vision, but if you have a certain vision, and let's say you are working to build and make in India, right? If they are proud to build and grow in that India, they will do it for you, and then you have to make ways for them to grow with you. So I would answer it in that way, because strategy and leadership has nothing to do with corporates or the scale of it. It has to just do with the clarity and the simplification of the problem in hand.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think that all the questions have been answered, sir. So we'll give vote of thanks to all the participants as well as Mr. Aditya Basu. So I thank you for joining us today at this insightful strategy and leadership bootcamp. On behalf of Jaro Education and the entire team, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you for your active participation. Furthermore, I wish to express appreciation to our guest speaker, Mr. Aditya Basu, sir. So thank you for sharing your invaluable expertise, experiences, and practical insights, and we are grateful for your time and effort. Last but not the least, thank you, audience, for your active involvement, questions, and enthusiastic engagement. Truly made this as a collaborative experience. We hope that the knowledge and ideas shared during this bootcamp will positively impact your future product management interviews. We look forward to hosting more engaging and enlightening events in the future. I have texted feedback form on the chat. Please share your feedbacks. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful day ahead. Follow Jaro Education on social media platforms for more updates, and download Jaro Connect application available on Play Store and App Store. Thank you so much, sir, once again for giving such an insightful session. Yeah, so even I had a doubt. Just wanted to ask you, if I may. So the thing is, most of the students are fresher as of now, and they want to move into a strategic consultant role. So where they can start their own, career path as in. So we have to select one role in life and then move forward, or we just need to, start with it.
No, I think, and there was a slide in there. So see, strategy, just a second. I'll quickly share. Can you see it? The slides?
Also.
Can you see it now?
No, sir, it's not visible as of now. Yeah, it is now. Yes.
Yeah. It's a good question. This is how the overall strategy consulting broadly looks like the business consulting, which has business strategy, corporate strategy, performance improvement, corporate finance. McKinsey, BCG, Bain, AD, the Big Four, Deloitte, and all perform in the business consulting, right? Then there is digital consulting, which is taking leaps and bounds, and there is a synergy which is happening. So there is digital strategy, enterprise architecture, product integration, product strategy. Then there is functional consulting. Like you're talking to manufacturers, you're talking to retailers, you are expert in that industry, and then you are helping them solve growth problems or efficiency problems or any problems, right? And finally, there is pre-sales and sales consulting, which is how effective you can do your sales and pre-sales, right? So this is a broad industry. I've categorized into these 4 buckets. This is how the whole ecosystem looks like. And this is how you grow, right? I think the base level is analyst or the consultant, depending upon multiple companies you work in. But the whole idea is you will start this career as an individual contributor, as an analyst or associate. You would be given one work stream or one problem statement, and you will own it, right? Then you will move on to a team. Let's say you are working with HUL, for example, and you are working just on the supply chain. So you would be leading just the supply chain work stream, and then there will be multiple analysts working on you. So if the goal of the supply chain is to improve cost efficiency by 15%, you will own that. And then they will have analysts working with you. Moving forward, it's an engagement manager where you own the entire project, obviously multiple work stream. So the problem statement typically would be, I want to grow my revenue from X to Y, or my EBITDA percentage from 3 to 8X, right? So you will own the entire space there and work towards that, right? finally, obviously, the associate partner VPs, it's all about bringing business. So while you are delivering, you have to bring in clients and talk to the clients, and finally, you have to also build capabilities, thought leadership, and so on. So that's how the strategic consulting looks like.
Great, sir. Great, sir. So I think so most of the questions would be to this format itself. And thank you so much, sir, for your valuable answer to me. So I'll be working on it, and I hope other audiences would be also working on it. Thank you so much, sir. And thank you, audience, once again for joining us. Thank you.
Again, bye-bye.